So apparently, uh, this is from the Daily Caller. I usually would not show videos of the Daily Caller from the Daily Caller on this show, but this seems pretty ridiculous. From the Daily Caller, Lincoln Project co founder Steve Schmidt says January 6th was profoundly more dangerous than the 9/11 attacks, and in the end, likely to kill a lot more Americans, including the casualties of the wars that lasted 20 years following it. Jesus, let's listen. Let's give. I'm not gonna say give him the benefit of the doubt because I think the Lincoln Project is ridiculous too. But let's see if what he actually said is as bad as as the Daily Caller ascribes. Let's listen to this.
My friend Matthew Dowd, our friend, talked about this. He couldn't be more right. The 1/6 attack for the future of the country is a profoundly more dangerous event than the 9/11 attacks. And in the end, the 1/6 attacks are likely to kill a lot more Americans than were killed on the 9/11 attacks, which will include the casualties of the wars that lasted 20 years following it.
Jesus
My friend Matthew Dowd,
Christ.
our friend, talked about this. He couldn't
Oh
be
wait, it's
more right.
replaying now. It's replaying now. Oh my god. Oh my god. Listen, I just want to reiterate that the Lincoln Project is profoundly unhelpful to any sort of democratic cause, any left wing cause. We know, even if you argued that they were helpful in getting Republicans or right wingers to at least vote in the elections against the Republicans, we know from the 2020 elections that they did not have any significant role in getting Republicans to vote against Trump and the Republican Party. On the contrary, more people voted Republicans than ever before. Trump is the second, is the presidential candidate with the second most votes in history, only second to Joe Biden, who obviously won that election. Trump got more votes than Barack Obama in both of his elections. Yes, you can argue that that should be the case every year because the population grows, but the amount that he won, that he exceeded Obama by, is quite. It's not just a few million. It's quite quite a number. But the idea that January 6th was more, what was it he exactly said? Christ. Profoundly more dangerous than the 9/11 attacks. My God. My God. I mean, listen. I think there are people who are downplaying what happened on January 6th. I think there are people who are overplaying or overdoing what happened on January 6th. Like, the best thing we can do is literally take what happened on January 6th when when thousands of Trump supporters stormed the Capitol and essentially had a violent riot that ended in the deaths of 5 people. We should take it for what it is. We should understand what some of the people there were trying to do. We should understand there were people who certainly wanted to overturn the election results. I mean, that was the protest was about. That's what the original event was about. That's why they stormed the Capitol. They wanted to overturn the election results. But we do know that there were some people who were a lot more serious about actually carrying it out based on what they brought down there and based on the planning they had, the money they put behind it, such as the organizers of the event. We should take what happened on January 6th with the level of seriousness it deserves. But at the same time, there are people who are, in my estimation, overdoing it to the point where they look foolish and they demean what actually happened, and then it makes it harder for other people to take it seriously. But this is just the fucking, like, the highest of the high you can overplay this. This is going to be profoundly unhelpful, just provide ridiculous ammunition to the right to downplay it. It is in no way profoundly more dangerous than the 9/11 attacks. And I'm someone who thinks that 9/11 was used to completely bring the people of this country into a mode where they were willing to give up basic freedoms for safety. I think 9/11 was taken advantage of, and people, the Bush administration, overplayed that in order to illegally invade Iraq based on nothing. Millions of innocent dead Iraqis, women and children included. Millions. And this guy is saying, in the end, likely to kill a lot more Americans, including the casualties of the wars that lasted the 20 years following it. Millions of dead Iraqis. These people never consider the people overseas. I'm sure he's just considering the American soldier lives, which are obviously should be considered. Thousands upon thousands of American soldiers who were sold this war, that they were going over there to fight for American freedoms and fight people who were responsible for 9/11, lied to as well. Or American soldiers who had no way out of their current financial situations, their economic class, other than joining the military so they could get a roof over their family's head and get an education for themselves. The idea that what happened on January 6th is even close to the fallout from 9/11. We can just focus on the fallout of 9/11. Steve Schmidt of the Lincoln Project. Laradoliso says, I don't like Schmidt at all, but he specifically said American lives. He said January 6th likely to kill a lot more Americans, including the casualties of the war. He didn't say specifically American casualties of the wars. So it's even actually more ridiculous because he's claiming that. Let's re-listen to be safe. Let's go. We don't need the whole thing, but let's listen
more
to the end.
dangerous event than the 9/11 attacks. And in the end, the 1/6 attacks are likely to kill a lot more Americans than were killed on the 9/11 attacks, which will include the casualties of the wars that lasted 20 years following it.
I mean, it's unclear whether he's specifying Americans, but it's even more gross, though, that he wouldn't consider the enormous amount of foreign casualties. Because I'm sure, we know how people on the right, regardless of whether they are upstanding Republicans trying to bring Republican values back, like the Lincoln Project, or full-on MAGA people, we know how much they value non-American lives. I mean, gross. Everything that this country is now dealing with, everything, barring some economic issues that go back to Reagan, and obviously the racial issues that have always dealt with, this country's always dealt with, but also can be traced directly back, at least the modern ones, to Reagan as well, in my estimation, in terms of the demonization of social programs and welfare. Can go back to 9/11. The destruction of any sort of civil liberties in this country, the spying apparatus, the never-ending wars, the dire situation this country is in where we suddenly can't afford things because we're in debt, which I think is bullshit. But that's the excuse they use, and that debt comes from what the Bush administration plunged us into with the never-ending wars. We are in this shit because of what happened on 9/11 and the fallout. The war in Afghanistan, the war in Iraq. I mean, you could include all the people, all the victims of the various terrorist groups that came out of us completely destabilizing countries over in the Middle East. ISIS, for example. The American casualties, the vast majority of the Middle Eastern Arab Muslim casualties. I mean, this is not, I don't care what the addendums are. This is a ridiculous comparison. Ridiculous. And it honestly also demeans the seriousness of January 6th. Because if you can't look at January 6th in a realistic lens, I mean, this is gross. I see in the YouTube chat some people are talking about like Civil War. Listen, I don't ascribe to this whole Civil War nonsense. This is whenever Civil War comes up, it's a far right wing ideal. It's what they hope for. It's a push from them. We are not on the brink of civil war in this country. Please. Don't fall for this bullshit that there's going to be some sort of civil war in the coming years and this country's going to split and we're going to have a new confederacy versus the union. No, come on. Don't fall for this bullshit. Don't fall. If he wants to argue that lives will be lost because of Republicans around the country changing voter laws so that they can more easily win elections in the future, and that will hurt more people. You, don't need to peg that to January 6th. Because that's been happening regardless. It absolves their own role, to be quite frank. Because this has been going on for years before the Lincoln Project felt it was necessary to speak out against the Republican Party when they were the ones in power of the Republican Party doing these things. The gerrymandering, the voter ID laws, the voter fraud push. Even that argument fails, in my view, because you don't need to go back to January 6th. You could go back to the Republican campaigns for decades. Go back to the 90s. Reagan, even in the 80s. You don't peg that on January 6th. That's how you absolve yourself from your role. I also think, what is the purpose of comparing it to 9/11? It's bizarre. Bizarre. And again, this is coming from someone who thinks 9/11 was perverted to do some of the most disgusting things in this country that have ever been done, in my estimation. From the decay of civil liberties to the never-ending wars which have left once again, and I stress this every time because if you ignore this, it means you think their lives don't matter. Millions of dead Iraqis. What we have done to people who we don't represent, who can't vote for our leaders, who get nothing from us. The destruction we've caused to them and their families and their home it's disgusting.